Bhavanam Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Bhavanam Kevalam, Just a moment, please. Welcome, everyone. My name is Dada Maheshvarananda. I have been asked to coordinate this ProutSpace workshop. It is a workshop, meaning it is not a class, it's a collaboration with all of us, trying to understand how to present Prout to the public. So I will talk a little bit and then you get a chance to talk, because we're all learning and we're all trying to do this. Let me explain briefly why I am facilitating this. I learned meditation back in 1974, before many of you were born. And at that time, I heard about Prout, the progressive utilization theory. The person who explained it to me didn't understand it very well, but it was a synthesis of so many ideas that I had been struggling with about peace and justice, about violence and nonviolence, about building community, and about economic justice. So I have been impassioned with Prout ever since. But the main problem is very few people have ever heard of Prout. So for all the years that I have been a monk, I have been telling people about Prout, and I've been giving a lot of lectures, hundreds of them, frankly, in Maharlika, the Philippines, where I used to work, in South America, where I worked for 21 years, and now for the last 5 years, I've been working here in the United States, where I was born. I give talks wherever I can, as often as I can, to high schools, to university classes, to cooperatives, to yoga studios, everywhere I can get a chance. And I always talk about Prout. It's been invaluable. And partly, to a large extent, because of the questions I get at the end. Questions are great, because that's when you get to understand what connected and what didn't connect. If you get questions about whatever, things that are irrelevant, you realize they're really not listening. But when the questions are on topic, then you understand that, yes, not only they're listening, but they're helping you understand every time you say something that's not clear. Every time they have a doubt about something. So that's been very, very useful for me. So I wanted to share with you some of the things that I have learned through giving classes, lectures, talks, conferences about Prout. First of all, there's an opinion that some people have that we should not use the word Prout because it's not well known. Economic democracy sounds a little easier to comprehend than the progressive utilization theory. So sometimes I announce my talks that I'm going to talk about economic democracy. I always use the word Prout after I start my talk, because I want people to learn this. I want Prout to become a household name. I want everyone in the world to understand Prout. If you choose not to use it, it's okay, but what are we hiding? I recommend being pretty open about it. Some people suggest that we should start with the 5 fundamental principles. Sound logical. They're fundamental. They are not easy to comprehend. I do not start with the 5 fundamental principles, though I do talk about the first one without calling, about the ceiling on wealth. That's a great challenge. The ceiling, that no individual should be allowed to accumulate physical wealth without the clear permission of the society, the collective body. That's the first principle. I don't use those words. I talk about the need for a ceiling on wealth. And one of the tricks I use is, first of all, I'm talking about the minimum necessities of life. People can comprehend that. They can comprehend that we have a problem of poverty in this world. We have a problem of hunger. 5 million people die of hunger every year, and 2 million of those are children dying of hunger. When the United Nations says that today there's enough food on our planet to feed more than our current population, 10 billion people. So I asked the crowd, why is there hunger? Because it's not our priority. Profit is our priority. Greed is our priority. Saving lives is not the priority of our economy. So I also explain about poverty. You know, that more than 1.2 billion people, that's 1 out of 7 billion, 7 in our population, world population, right, are suffering extreme poverty. This is living on less than $1.25 a day, according to the United Nations. Calculations by economists, how much it would cost to end extreme poverty for everyone on the planet, is that it would cost only 10% of what the world spends on arms and military every year. I say, I think we would need less arms and military if we eliminated extreme poverty in the world. So people can understand the idea of the 5 minimum necessities of life. And I asked them, can you imagine a world where no one had to worry about feeding their family, clothing? Everyone had some kind of house to live in. It might be small, but a minimum safe, warm, dry shelter. And nobody had to worry about getting sick and going to the doctor, and nobody had to worry about the education of their kids. What a lovely world that would be. It wouldn't be perfect. There'll still be lots of psychic clash. There'll still be lots of arguments among people. But nobody would be suffering from physical hardship. So then I talk about the problem of wealth distribution. I point out, what is the minimum wage in this country, wherever I happen to be that day, okay? This country, right? My audience. And then I asked them if that minimum wage is sufficient for a family of 4 to provide the food, clothes, housing, medical care, and education. In almost every country, it's not. Even when I was in Norway, they pointed out there's a major problem of housing, that young people can just never afford a house, even in the wealthiest, or one of the wealthiest countries of Europe, the world. So I talk then about the ceiling on wealth. I say, so this is the minimum wage. I ask the audience, what's the maximum wage? They laugh. There's no maximum wage in this country. Excuse me, but I would like to disagree. In the United States, in every developed country, even in many undeveloped countries, you can see on the internet what are government salaries. Government salaries, if you are a starting worker in the United States at the federal level, national level, at a state government job, or at a municipal city government job, you can see the starting wage. In the United States, it's around $10,000 something, less than 11,000. Then you can look at what the maximum salaries are. The salaries for the military generals, the salaries for the Supreme Court judges, the salary for the Congress, Parliament members, the salaries for the Prime Minister or President. You can see all their salaries. They're listed on the internet today. In the United States, it's usually about 10 times more. President Obama changed for 10 people, president, vice president, and cabinet members, to change it up to 15 times more. But that's it. Nobody can make more than that. And I asked the audience, does this sound just to you? Does this sound fair to you? I say, why don't we have a similar ceiling on wealth in society? Nobody calls our government communist because we have a ceiling on wealth, on salaries, a cap on salaries. Why don't we do the same thing for everyone in society? And I explain, I'm very radical, okay? I told you at the beginning, I'm a revolutionary, all right? This is a very radical idea. But audiences generally like it, especially young people. I talk about maximum utilization and rational distribution. Those are nice terms, but I'm not going to get into the physical, mental, mundane, super mundane, potential, spiritual potentials. I mean, that is way too complex for an introductory talk about Prout. I talk always about the 3 levels of the economy. And I explain that capitalism works very well on the small scale, and that we should encourage private enterprise on the small scale. But there should be limits to that. Because whereas capitalism works very well on the small scale, it becomes monopolies when it becomes giant corporations. Again, people can relate to that. So then I talk about cooperatives. And I give statistics about cooperatives. For example, that one out of 7 people are a member of a cooperative in the world. That cooperatives create more jobs than all of the multinational corporations put together. That cooperatives are more likely to succeed than private enterprises. And I explained that in the first year, when a new business is started in the United States, something like 40% at least go bankrupt in the first year of private businesses. And in 5 years, at least 60% of new businesses have gone bankrupt. However, only 10 to 12% of cooperatives fail in the first 5 years. It's a much higher success rate. Now, I've asked economists if they can help me find the statistics, because credit unions, cooperatives are very carefully monitored. So we know exactly every cooperative that starts and every cooperative that fails. Cooperatives cannot tell you how many private businesses fail. Economists explain that the only way they can do that is if somebody pays them to gather all the data. And nobody's willing to pay economists to gather the data on failing companies. It's fascinating. I've asked several economists, they all explain it's true. Nobody knows how many startups fail. People in Silicon Valley, they claim it's over 90% fail in the first year. Over 90% of private startups, the .com and everything today. But nobody knows. Fascinating. Anyway, then I asked the audience, do you know these statistics? Have you heard all these statistics about cooperatives? Do you hear these statistics on the CNN business news or whatever business news comes on the radio or television? And they say, no. I asked them, why not? The real reason is that business news is for private investors. It's for rich people. And private investors, they're bored with cooperatives. They can't buy them, they can't sell them, they can't break them up. They can give them a loan and get, a small percentage back like a normal. That's boring for investors. They want to make money quick. So people have not heard about cooperatives very much. Whenever people ask me how to start a Prout cooperative, I say, go to your National Association of Cooperatives. That National Association of Cooperatives in your country, they know first all the laws about cooperatives. They have a lifetime experience of working with cooperatives. They know all the successful cooperatives and they can direct you to them to talk with them. And they know all the problems. They know they've experienced every problem possible. And they know how to solve those problems. So I always advise people to go to the National Association of Cooperatives. And finally, I talk about, large-scale private enterprises, which in the United States are called public utilities, owned by the government, not profit, not for loss. Anyway, so this is basically how I explain Prout to the public. I talk about ethics, I talk about moral leaders. I talk about how anybody can become a moral leader, Sadvipra. And I have met people who are not educated. I've met people who couldn't even read and write and were fantastic speakers, revolutionary speakers. So anybody can become a moral leader. And then I say the world needs you, courageous women and men, willing to walk your talk, to live your values, and to fight for justice, and to build a better world. As I said earlier, the questions you get when you give a presentation about Prout are invaluable, because each question will point to something that you didn't explain clearly. Okay, that's for my presentation. What are your opinions and what are your questions? You can unmute yourselves now. I'd love to see you. If you turned on your camera, I'd be really happy.
Namaskar, Dada. I have
Yes.
a question.
In Portugal?
Yes, exactly. How do you adjust, or do you adjust your talk to each individual audience? Do you have that in mind, or you just give like a standard presentation wherever you go? How do you manage that?
Good question. When I wrote my book, After Capitalism, the first time, a Proutist asked me, who's your audience? I said, that's easy. Anybody who will read the book. I don't care. But I realized there is a big difference between the middle class and wealthy people in the wealthy countries of the world who think that capitalism is fantastic. And most other people in the rest of the world who are desperate for alternatives to capitalism. That's the biggest difference I've encountered in audiences. So when I'm speaking in the United States, for example, where I'm working now, or in wealthy countries, I spoke to the economics professors in Finland, for example, at the university there. And one woman said, an economist, she'd just come back from Africa, and they're desperate for capitalism. Capitalism is great, capitalism works. And, capitalism is wonderful. I have a funny slide that shows a movie theater, and the movie that's playing is the economy. And half the people coming out of the movie theater, very wealthy, dressed, well-dressed, they're smiling. It was a great movie, The Economy. And from the other door, all the poor people are coming out of the movie theater, sad, because the economy doesn't work for them. And I explain, capitalism is great for some people, but not for everyone. It doesn't work for everyone. So anyway, to answer your question again about the audience, that's the main consideration. I spend more time, well, a little time, not a lot, a little time addressing more the problems of capitalism. I also focus my presentation on the country where I'm talking, okay? Of course, everything's translated into the language. Portuguese and Spanish, I speak, but I get somebody to help me with the slides, so there's no mistakes. When I was in Taiwan, for example, Korea, I got all my slides translated into Chinese, Korean, whatever language I'm presenting in. And for example, I use Forbes magazine has a list every year of the world's richest people. So I'll click on the country that I'm going to, Portugal, Korea, whatever, and it will show all of the wealthiest billionaires from that country and where they made their fortunes. You know, for example, the biggest supermarket chain, the telecommunications company, whatever. Many times the people have heard of those companies. They're the biggest company in the country, you know. So I show their pictures and I show their wealth. You know, just one slide, you understand, the wealthiest people in your country. To highlight the gap. These are tremendous wealth. The wealth is unimaginable, actually. $1 billion, you can't even conceive, and hundreds of billions of dollars. You can't even conceive how much that is. So, and I talk about poverty in their country. So I have the statistics about poverty in this country, wherever I am, Venezuela, wherever. And that's basically how I kind of direct it for the audience. But otherwise, pretty much the same for the country.
Thank you, Dada. I have another question without wanting to monopolize the time. But whenever I talk with people about Prout or give a small presentation or something, the most common or pertinent question, actually it is also the most common, is people ask, but where is Prout implemented? Where can we see it in action to see that it works? What do you answer in these situations?
That is probably the most frequently asked question. I explain that there are models of Prout, and there are models of ideal cooperatives around the world. And yet, there's no government that has implemented the whole Prout model as a whole yet. I will excuse myself for 1 minute because I have to use the restroom. Excuse me.
And while Dada is away, I can say that I'm interested in the social cycle, but I have asked him earlier that, don't you think the social cycle is an important point? But he will say, no, it's not good. So I mean, I will not mention this when Dada is here, but I find it a very good tool. And I've found people who find it as a good tool to understand that no, nothing will last forever. The eras are changing and they are rotating, and we can see the tendencies in the societies. But let's keep quiet now before he comes.
The video is recorded. Maybe he sees it later.
Excuse me. I'm back. What have been your experiences with talking about Prout to the public? What happens?
Dada, I have one question before we can talk about the experiences.
Shiva Priya, where do you live?
In Brazil.
In Brazil, thank you.
And about the models of Prout that you say there is some ideal places where we find models of Prout, where?
Yeah, you better
I wanna
have some.
see it.
You better have some answers before you can. Usually, master units seem to be the best picture. And there are a handful of master units. There's one or two in Brazil and one or two in other places that you can say, okay, here's a community that is, you know, trying to follow these principles.
But Dada, they are not models of Prout. There's
Yeah,
a lot
well.
of things that is not ideal. There's some master unit that follows everything that is in Shakyamuni, for example, that we can go and see.
Well,
Okay. And then another question, and about some projects that happens like in countries like Venezuela or Cuba. You think it's a bad strategy for us to talk about them because there is a misunderstood point of view in Brazil that is a communist place or something like that. You think that make that link with Prout and say, oh, that is a good experience there. Maybe not good for Prout because it will be linked with communism or something like that? For example, like Mission Vivenda in Venezuela or something good things that happens in Cuba.
I have a lot of confidence in Prout.info. In English. The Tools to Change the World website, toolstochangetheworld.org, has more than 60 languages. It will automatically translate the entire book and the entire website into your language. 60 of the major languages are there. It's not bad. Prout.info is usually what I direct people to. Prout.org is a problem. That's really old. But they won't release the URL, so we can't change it at all. Did that answer your question?
I have to look for the sites to see if it happens.
Okay.
And Dada, I have a question for you.
Yes, Prashanta.
Yes, I haven't given a talk on Prout in a while. Years ago, I
How
did.
long?
Pardon?
How long?
Oh, about 10, 15 years.
Short time, okay. Not long.
Short time in the cosmic scheme of things.
Cosmic scheme of things, yes, yes.
And so are you finding it easier? Well, I should preface it by saying the time is coming closer to be much more active in Prout. And are you finding it easier now as capitalism is collapsing or slowly collapsing, to that the Prout message is more receptive?
I think so. Frankly, I think I've gotten to become a better speaker since then. That's another part of the, another part of the equation.
Sure.
I practice a lot. Practicing helps tremendously.
I
But
believe
yes.
it. Okay, all right, thank you.
I mean, for example, this first 30 minutes, I'm just speaking from memory because I practice so much. I can give the statistics, I can give the facts, I can give the, I can show the whole model. I went on for 30 minutes, I can go on for an hour and a half. No problem. Because I practice so much and I have memorized how I want to present it. That helps a lot.
Yeah.
Practice. Yes. And yes, I think the world is more receptive to Prout. None of us know the future, obviously. But, one lesson of history is that things go on for a long time and then they change really fast. And the fall of the Soviet Union, the fall of communism in Eastern Europe, things change fast. 2 years ago, except for a few epidemiologists in the world, nobody could predict about how COVID would affect the world, the whole world. And even those epidemiologists, they had, ideas, it could be like this, it could be like that, but. So nature is changing quickly, the climate is changing quickly, and capitalism, I tell people, that according to the business news, capitalism will go on forever. I don't believe it. 77 empires have existed in the history of the world, about 77. Historians disagree on a few of them, and out of those 77 empires, really only one empire still continues, and that's the economic empire that the United States has kind of developed. I don't think it'll last forever either. So when it, what's the alternative? So I present Prout as the best alternative to both capitalism, global capitalism, and communism.
Yes, I agree with you. That's usually how I presented it, as an alternative to capitalism and communism. And yeah, I could see just from my circle of people that I know, just talking more about Prout, they are more receptive. And also, I guess to Shiva Priya, I'd like to say that, yeah, I can't point to anywhere in the world that it is implemented. And that's why I would say, that's why it's still called a theory. It hasn't been implemented in practice. So it's the progressive utilization theory, and intellectuals will like the word theory. And I don't know what it'll be called when it's implemented, the progressive utilization something or another. But I guess that the word theory will have to be thrown out. So
Interesting.
So I'm here to learn, making notes, and I have to bone up on my public speaking skills like you, Dada,
Good.
have already mastered.
Dada?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm Ranjita from Norway.
Yes.
Yeah, and I have been struggling a bit about this concept of capitalism. But is it not actually market neoliberalism that we are fighting against, and not capitalism as per se? Because I think capitalism will always be there, and Prout is not against capitalism as a
Small scale.
as a model on small scale. And I don't know, it's just something I'm struggling with. Would it be wiser to not emphasize so much capitalism and talk more about market neoliberalism as the main thing that we are fighting against? I'm just wondering.
Excellent question, excellent idea. It depends on your audience. For example, neoliberalism, most people in the United States do not know that term.
Yeah.
So I can't use that.
Okay.
I mean, I have to define it first before I say that I'm against it, you know. Often I use the term global capitalism. You could say corporate capitalism.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with your point. And again, that's where you have to kind of judge the audience of your country where you are.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody in Europe knows what neoliberalism is, but not in this country. We don't even use the metric system in this country. You can see how backwards the United States is. But,
okay.
yeah. Yes.
And another comment about that we don't find Prout implemented anywhere, but there is so many different groups and communities that are trying to get free of the system in so many different ways around the world, and that is what I find really encouraging, because we are not alone. We are so many people that want change. So that is encouraging to think about. And there's there is economy, and there is this not only on theoretical levels, but transition town, and you have Mondragon in Spain. And in Italy, lots of cooperatives, and it's so bad that we don't know about these things because it's not mentioned, as you said, in media. So we are many.
It's true, Ranjita, and that's a very good point to make. Is I talk about successful cooperative. How many, just whatever country I'm in, I'll point out how many successful cooperatives are running now in your country. Are you aware of this 750 cooperatives or 3,040 cooperatives, For example, yes, and you're right, transition towns, eco villages, so many different communities, co-housing, land trusts. There's so many different alternatives there. Yes. Yeah. Arun is next.
Yes, I would like to say about
capitalism.
Yeah, I'm from Finland, so I'm living in the same kind of society as Ranjita. I say we are not the richest. They have the oil, we don't have the oil. So, but the founder of Prout didn't talk about neoliberalism. He talked about capitalism, and he may have even said that capitalism must be eradicated, which is quite clear. And when you say that small scale, it's good. But when you say capitalism, it means the capital is the sacred thing in this system. It has all the power. If you have the money, you can move your factories to Thailand and you can do whatever. And that is capitalism, and there's nothing really good in it after these 200 years now. So I don't think we should be fostering any positive ideas that, oh, but I like capitalism because this house is warm now and I get the warm water here. So that's not a reason.
Yeah.
Tyrone, you're pointing out a challenge for Proutists, right? When we talk about Prout, Ranjit in the room, you're pointing out, okay, here's a topic, you know, how do we present it in this country that people can relate to? You know, what are the problems we have to point out and why this is the best solution? Maheshwar is next.
Thank you. I would say that, and this is what I say when people ask me about projects or models of Prout in the world. I always point out to Oroquieta, because this is a group of Proutists using Proutist ideas to improve the lives of the people. So this is, I think this is a very good example. And then, you know, I am lucky, you know, I only speak to Portuguese people about Prout, and I can always reference.
Pause for a moment and explain. Oroquieta is, Orococo is a cooperative in the city of Oroquieta in Philippines, Maharlika, that is producing coconut products and selling them to the public. So it is a successful cooperative. They are struggling. I just did a 10-week Tools to Change the World group with them. They're exactly on the opposite side of planet Earth from me, so we had a great time together. The wonderful group of young people running this cooperative, but it's not easy. They're struggling too. So anyway, but yes, it is a good example. Go ahead, Maheshwar. I just want to explain to everybody that.
And then I use the example of the block level planning here in Portugal. We are developing for a year and a half, more or less, a block level planning project, and I usually speak about it. I don't know if there's any attempts anywhere else in the world of doing block level plannings, and how successful have they been, but maybe that's also a good way or a good model we could tell to people. And then after these comments, I also have a question, but it can come later, which is the person, you know, you have the theory, it can be very well, but you know, people usually care more about the person, you know, the person has a greater impact than the word. So how do you present yourself? Do you go dressed with your uniform?
Every time in uniform.
Okay. And people,
and I have to start with that. So, you know, every TED Talk, I studied, you know, TED Talks, you know, are very good talks about ideas. And virtually every TED Talk begins with the person introducing why in the world they're standing there. Why are they impassioned about climate change or about whatever, education or whatever? They have to start with a little bit of backstory about who they are. So I have a 3 or 4 minute explanation why I became a monk and what it means and what the color orange means and why I'm standing here and why a monk should be concerned about hunger and poverty and suffering in the world. So yes, that's always has to be your introduction. You have to say who you are and why you're there. Sometimes you'll get a really nice introduction from somebody else. That's wonderful, because then you're halfway there. You've already kind of won over your audience as somebody that the audience respects, a teacher, a professor, a local leader or something. If that person is introducing you, whew, then already you're a good person in the eyes of the people before you start talking. But it's good to tell a little bit of your story and why you're passionate about economic democracy and Prout. Very important. Just some comments. Otokoko, video about Otokoko, the cooperative that changes lives, is in the chat. And Arun points out that the Finnish Twitter account says it's always a good time to start talking about what to do after capitalism. Okay, thank you, Ranjita. Other comments?
How well versed do you feel somebody should be in Prout before starting to give presentations on it? Or put the question in another way, do people usually, when you present Prout to people, usually ask questions that go very much in depth into economics, or, you know, because maybe that's something that stops people from doing it because they're not experts in economics and they're afraid to get really tough questions that they cannot answer.
That is a common fear or worry, right? Baba once told a group of whole timers, Dadas and Didis, monks and nuns, if somebody asks you a question when you're giving a talk and you don't know the answer, you should say, that's a very good question, but it will take me some time to answer. So you come back tomorrow and then I can answer that question properly. And then he says you have 24 hours to look up and find the answer. Look it up, ask somebody who knows, because you have to find out the answer. But anyway, it's a trick Baba taught us. You can always say, excuse me, but I don't know the answer to that. And your honesty and your humility, people can respect. You don't have to know it all. And you look up the answer. So the next time you get I got a question in Norway. I was in Norway, and is it Divyamurti or somebody there?
Divyajyoti.
What?
Divyajyoti.
Divyajyoti, thank you. I'm sorry. He had arranged a talk with a whole group of leftist union organizers, socialists, communists, and they asked, is Prout a centralized economy, or is it central planning, or is it local? Something like that. I didn't know, but I looked it up and found out that actually a little bit of both. We don't believe in centralized economic planning, though we do believe that certain things in the economy should be, like key industries, should be controlled by the local government. So yes, it'll happen sometimes. Admit you don't know everything. Honesty is the best policy, but start immediately. Every one of you should start talking about Prout. We started a club some time ago. Some people here, Saraswati in Malaysia, Kalyani in Malaysia, Arun has been there from Finland, Devanishta in the United States. This club is called Spiritually Speaking. And it happens twice a week. Every 2 weeks, we have a meeting about this time. It's going to start as soon as this ends. And we have another one on Wednesday, which is later. And it's free. You can make a donation if you want, but it's free, the club. And it's practicing how to talk about Prout and spirituality to the public. And it's just a group of us. It's just a group of friends, right? But you practice giving short 7-minute speeches. I've been a member of the Toastmasters Club, which is a public speaking club, started in 1921. It was all men until 1970 something. It's amazing. Now it's a little more than half are women. And I'm embarrassed to say how much I've improved in the last 4 years, because I've been teaching for 45 years, and you thought I would have learned it all a long time ago. But the fact is if you practice public speaking in a supportive group that will give you feedback, supportive feedback, they always start praising. You know, we always start with the positives. You were so brave to get up there. That was wonderful. Even though you couldn't say anything, no problem. You had the courage to stand up there at the microphone. That was great. And next time you can, you know, here's some 2 or 3 things you can work on for next time to improve it, you know. But really good. So we practice like that. And, you know, there is no substitute for practice and getting good feedback. So I highly recommend it. I'll put the, Arun, if you can find the spiritually speaking and put in the chat, that'd be great. But if not, I'll find it soon. Anyone else?
I have a question in regards to like communism. If you talk about the alternatives to capitalism, communism, you know, there's many different flavors of communism, if you want to use that word. It could be socialism, what was in the former USSR or Russia, there's Cuba, and then compared to, you know, in North America, we call Sweden, Finland, Norway, the Scandinavian countries socialist, but I call them sort of capitalism light. You know, they're capitalistic, but with a socialist bent. I mean, they're capitalistic, but more socialistic. I tried to lump them all into one. I know there's many variations. Do you get any questions on that at all?
Sometimes, okay, first of all, people don't ask me about other things, but they ask me, you know, how does Prout relate to that? Is Prout socialism? The founder of Prout called Prout progressive socialism. So I use that when I'm talking to groups that might be sympathetic to socialism. The United States, there's a lot of people who hate socialism. Bernie Sanders, though, you might have heard, was a presidential candidate, a very popular one. It came very close to getting the nomination. Bernie Sanders is a socialist. That's he's a Democrat too, but he tells everybody all his life he's a socialist. So there is, but still the right wing, the Republican conservatives and radical right wing are saying everything that the Democratic Party is doing, that the president now is doing, are socialist. And that is terrible. So I you don't really have to qualify everybody and everything. In my Tools to Change the World study circle, we talk about Marx and Marxism, and we compare it in the first module, because, you know, the founder of Prout, Ranjan Sarkar, praised Marx, called him Reverend Marx, said he was a prophet of the poor, that, you know, he tried to stop exploitation. His critique of capitalism is still valid today. But Marx wrote very, very little. You know, we're talking about out of 4,000 pages about capitalism, there's very few paragraphs, sentences, and pages about what should be the alternative. You know, workers of the world should unite, become a vanguard, but there's very little about how the economics should run. And so every country that tried to implement communism failed terribly because they had no idea what they're doing. Marx didn't give any clarity about what the alternative should be. So that's why there's so many variations.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Well, it doesn't really answer it. I'm just pointing out the challenge.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a real answer, but I just want to get your opinion on it. So
Yeah.
no, that's good.
And you know your country. How in your country, how does socialism, how do people relate to it? I mean, Michael Moore in the United States said, what was his movie about capitalism?
Oh,
Made a
yeah, I
movie.
forget the name. Yeah.
About the sickness of capitalism. Anyway, others? I'd really like to know your experiences. What happens whenever you try to talk about Prout to people? What do you get stuck on?
Namaskar, Dada.
Saraswati,
Yeah.
in Malaysia.
Yes. So I just okay. I think some resistance which I kind of sense is regarding the first principle, that is having a wealth cap. So I think even among Margis, I find it is a bit difficult for them to accept that. So how do we kind of navigate through that principle?
It's a tough one. I agree. And, you know, sometimes I have been known in the past to say things like, you know, $10 million. Everybody should be allowed to own a house or 2 houses, maybe even 3 houses, but not 1,000 apartments in the center of the capital city, you know. That's, you don't need that. So 90% of all millionaires in the United States, 90% of them made their wealth from real estate, from land ownership, 90%. That's where the McDonald's Corporation, you know, the hamburgers, right? McDonald's, they make their money from rent, from, you know, they buy a piece of land, they make somebody, you know, take over the hamburger business there, but the rent they get, the corporation gets from that franchise owner, that's where they make their profit, not even from the hamburgers. So anyway, I mean, people pay high rent because they're selling a lot of hamburgers. But anyway, that's the story. Anyone else? What are your experiences when you talk about Prout to the public?
I feel like people see it as a very well-meaning theory, but not practicable. I don't think many people take it seriously, you know, when I do it, maybe I can see in people's faces, maybe 1 or 2 out of 20 or 30 could actually go read more about it, you know, or ask a question. So yeah, well-meaning, but not very realistic, I think. But maybe that's also, you know, that's probably my fault. I need to learn how to do it better and to be more assertive and, you know, all of this.
You're learning, you're practicing. 2 or 3 say yes, that's good. You're working to get more. But I think it's also a question of the country. I don't think Portugal has realized that capitalism is the problem. So if capitalism isn't a problem, why should we change? What's the problem?
I
I'm
usually
going to be right back. Excuse me for a moment.
Yeah. Okay.
And to fill the silence, I can tell that I haven't been talking to so many lately. I wrote in the chat how I first read the principles as a student, and oh, this is great. And I translated them into Finnish, and I had a presentation in actually it was environmental club. Okay, but I write quite a lot on the internet. So I get this opposition, and mostly it's like, oh, it's communism. Oh, it's communism. We've seen that. So that's what I mostly get. Yeah. And what comes to what Prashanta mentioned, this calling the Nordic countries as socialist countries, we laugh at it because we are totally capitalistic. We used to have state-owned companies still in the 70s and still have some remains, but this is in full speed since the late 80s. Yeah, the international capital is here.
Yeah, I like to call that capitalism light. It's still capitalism, but it's sort of a lighter version.
No, this is nothing light in Finland.
Well, I think compared to America and Canada, it's light, but I mean, when you're living in it, it may not feel light. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's just my impression.
Yeah.
Dada, about what Maheshvarananda told of the practical side of the theory, I think it's something that also makes me very insecure when I'm going to talk about Prout, because the question people always ask is, so what do I have to do? And I think that is, we have a lot of things that we can do, like individuals, and we have a lot of things that we can do in another level, like an organization and with government. So it will be so good if it was clear to me what is this instance of organizations of Proutists. You say Samaj, or you say like what is the notion of state for Prout? In another way, when we say we must guarantee the basic necessities for everybody, and we think about the 5 basic necessities, okay, who will guarantee? It's not the state. It's not something that you give to them. So they have to have like power of purchasing. But what about education and health? It is a state, but what state? Is the bloc, the political unity? What is that political unity? It's this economic bloc, this bloc of unity. I forgot the name in English. Bloco econômico.
We have trouble remembering that. Social economic zones or something like that.
Yes, and it seems that they are growing from a center. But okay, so I say you have to do that in individual sphere. You have a lot of things that you could do. You can start a cooperative. You can do many practical things. But what kind of organization you should join. So you do that in an organic manner with, unite the moralists. So I think this notion of samaj, this notion of social economic unity should be very clear in the notion of state also. Who will give,
Right, Sivapriya. And very, very challenging. You're right. When you want to get down to the specifics, sure. What I mean,
I have a dialect.
We're asking people to join us. And who are we? What is our organization in your country? You know, it's a challenge. To learn more about Prout, sure, that's easy. Here are the sites where you can, the tools to change the world is to help people learn more about Prout. But actually implementing it, that's a challenge. And I don't bother with socioeconomic zones at the beginning. It's complicated. Pranava has his hand up. I'm sorry I can't give a good answer to your question, Shivapriya, but it's very important. Pranava, you want to, in United States, Nashville?
Thank you, Dada. There was a very interesting exchange just a minute ago between Prashanta in Canada and I believe it's Arun in Finland. And that was the second exchange between the two of them regarding capitalism in the Scandinavian countries. The first time the comments were being made by Prashanta and Arun's was making hand gestures. And so the second time he said there's nothing about capitalism light in Finland. So I have a very specific question. Baba said that the Scandinavian countries are the closest thing to a progressive socialism, and I have been trying to track that down. It's not in any publication. It was ostensibly said on a field walk, but people know of this. And I would like to hear Arun's comments if you're familiar with that, and listen to your comments. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, if I have the time. Yes, we are sort of close in what we see, because we have the social welfare. So we have the education, we have the healthcare, and if you don't get money from anywhere, the society can support you, and you get a flat okay, and you have your phone and everything. So things like these are taken care of.
So necessities.
Yeah, basically. If you don't have food, you get to buy food. You get money for that. So the society takes care of this. So in that sense, but this is capitalism in full swing when the production is owned mostly by the capital, and they are moving we don't produce like shoes in Finland, only the minimum number, because it's too expensive to produce shoes in Finland. So they are produced in some countries where the labor is cheaper, where you don't need to pay people that much. So that is the situation. So the economy in itself, it's not balanced. But yes, we have many things are good here. And of course, that makes also more difficult to make a change, because people are happy. I get the money, I have the food, so what's the problem?
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I have one
And he's
question.
still trying to track down anybody who ever heard that expression that Baba said about whether the Scandinavian countries are the closest to Prout. If you ever hear any source of that, let us know.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, that's what I would ask, because Scandinavia is what is lacking for Prout, no? And the question about in Prout about self-sufficiency it's a challenge for many countries, because many countries in the world, they cannot be self-sufficient. Yeah? And when
Right.
Prout talks about self-sufficiency, I think it's and Baba Sarkis also talks about, in case that there is no self-sufficiency in one country and there is surplus in another, there can be free trade. Yeah, but actually in economics, people only talk about free trade. People never talk about self-sufficiency. Very little. I almost doesn't listen or hear about self-sufficiency. People talk about free trade, free trade, free trade. And I think this is one flag. I don't know if it's the proper expression in English. One flag of Prout, very important to a point for self-sufficiency, even if it's not necessarily able, if it's not feasible for some countries. Just one shot.
Anjan, you're in Rio de Janeiro, right?
Yeah, Dada G.
Okay, just so everybody knows, Brazil, right? Thank you. I agree that economic one thing I didn't mention yet, how do you explain Prout in 60 seconds? This is important. I mean, you have to be able to say what Prout is in a few words. I can tell you how I answer that, okay? And you need to find your own words, right? But I'm going to tell you my 30-second explanation of what Prout is. Prout stands for the progressive utilization theory, which is an alternative model created by a man from India, Prout Ranjan Sarkar. It's an alternative to both global capitalism and to communism. It's based on the economic self-reliance of every region, on cooperatives, on environmental protection, ecological protection, and on universal ethical values. It prescribes an economy with 3 layers. Private enterprise on the small scale, cooperatives, and public utilities on the large scale. It's an alternative, I think, is the best for the world. End of my 60 seconds. Say whatever words sound right to you, but practice it. Memorize it. Because unless you just keep silent the rest of your life, you're going to have to keep telling it to people. Who would like to give their 60-second explanation of what Prout is?
You use the better words, Dada. Now it's difficult.
I practice a lot. That's why I practice a lot. For years, I've been practicing. And still I adjust it, you know, and I can adjust it with the people I'm talking to. I mean, one thing that's very important when you're speaking to an individual or to a group of people, don't bore them. So I would, if somebody asked me a question, for example, what is Prout? Yes, I could answer in 3 days of talking. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to answer in 60 seconds. And then I'm going to see if they have another question. they have another question, then I'll give another 60-second answer to that question. You understand? Don't bore them. Don't talk too long. Just give relatively brief answers to every question.
Dada, we have here a challenge that we'll make a like 60 seconds video every week to talk about Prout. And I noticed when I was talking that I couldn't say like anything. So I just think about big questions. Let us put the problems, make the big questions, and then listen to the answers that people will say. And then we will talk about Prout with a dialogue with their answers. Then we will show there is a solution. And then we make another minute Prout with the answers people gave and with what is the Prout view to this answer. So it's very good that you say about it.
Yes. I wanted to make a short video. We made frequently asked questions about Prout. Some of them are not really frequently asked questions, but we said, what is Prout's opinion of capitalism, for example, was one. And the person who answered would answer in 2, maximum 3 minutes. So very short videos, right? What is Prout's view on cooperatives? What is, all these different questions. So I think that would be very useful in every language. They didn't like my video skills, so they said nothing is better than something. So I stopped, but we'll do it eventually. We'll get good people to do it. So I recommend it in your countries to consider doing that, because the attention span of people today is very short. So focus on the short.
Yes, we have the idea to make these big questions in this minute, and then we answer in a video of 5 minutes, like these drawing videos, with some images and some specific concepts.
Yes, and Shiva Priya, practice your 60-second explanation of Prout too.
Yeah, okay.
That's also important.
I think
Can we copy that your presentation?
Every time. I'm going to, I've been trying for years. I have to make a slide bank so you can take the slides that I use and, change them around and use slides that you like when you're making a talk about Prout to a group of people. But yes, you can always copy. We're all copying each other.
It's very good.
Maheshvar, I have to leave. Our Spiritually Speaking Club is about to start. You can see the link in the chat. You can join us if you like, but we've got this is the time especially for Southeast Asia and mostly in Vietnam, Malaysia, China, Hong Kong, Maharlika, Indonesia. Most of our people are from those countries.
Thank you very much.
Okay, please excuse me. Thank you very much, everyone.
Namaskar.
I enjoyed it very much. Keep talking about Prout.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you, Dadaji.
Namaskar.
And thank you all for coming. Just before we leave, I would like to say that next week, Arun is going to give another ProutSpace. It's still not, we still didn't talk about it, but it will happen next week on how to spread Prout through social media. So you're all welcome. And yeah, see you next week. Namaskar.
Thank you.